Imagine a world without MASH on American television. Isn't it difficult? This is due to the fact that the show was more than merely a hit. It changed the definition of a sitcom. MASH, which was set in the Korean War and combined humor with tragedy, debuted in 1972 during the last years of the Vietnam War. "I had an unpleasant love affair," she remarked. "Was it one of my doctors?" I asked. "No, it was your priest," she said. Its eccentric characters examined the absurdity of war and the human spirit's tenacity. It became a popular favorite very fast. However, the presentation was continuously changing behind the scenes. Tensions occasionally increased as it delved deeper into intricate character arcs and social commentary. Eventually, a number of well-liked celebrities made the painful decision to depart. Did they leave for personal, professional, or creative reasons? You might be surprised at the reasons. Let's examine what actually occurred in more detail. A heartfelt tale of conflict. There's a lot to sort through with this one, but first let's go back in time and see how this iconic series came to be. The story of MASH starts in a book rather than on television, like many other flawless TV shows. In 1968, Dr. Richard Hooker, a Korean War surgeon's pen name, MASH, written by Richard Hornberger, is a book about 3 Army medics. His experiences serving as a mobile Army surgical hospital doctor during the Korean War were fabricated in the book. The novel quickly became a bestseller and attracted Hollywood's attention because of its blend of gallows humor, genuine warmth, and brutal truth. Director Robert Altman turned the book into the irreverent and somber satire black comedy MASH 2 years after it was first released. Elliot Gould played Trapper John in the movie, and Donald Sutherland played Hawkeye Pierce. And it resonated with viewers, particularly at a time when the Vietnam War was a major topic in American culture. The movie quickly gained both critical and financial acclaim, taking home the Cannes Palme d'Or and the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. However, when CBS turned the idea into a weekly TV program 2 years later, the true cultural boom occurred. The television adaptation of MASH, created by Gene Reynolds and Larry Gelbart, had its debut on September 17, 1972. While maintaining the unconventional humor and the wartime context, it adopted a more serialized, character-driven format that made it possible to convey stories with greater depth and passion. After assuming the character of Hawkeye Pierce, Alan Alda swiftly rose to prominence in the series. CBS took a bet by moving the first season to Saturday nights, despite the fact that it had such poor ratings that show was almost cancelled. Ratings skyrocketed after this action. So did the cultural impact of the show. The show also broke guidelines according to several. Using genuine battle footage and playing with format, it was the first of its sort in Hollywood. It was also among the first American comedies to frequently use the sound of helicopters rather than a laugh track. Alda Allen. He portrayed Hawkeye and went on to become the show's director, writer, and creative force, advocating for greater emotional nuance and realism. But the characters in MASH grew up with it. To put it mildly, not every performer was in favor of the new course. Some thought their parts were becoming less significant, or more like caricatures. Others experienced personal difficulties or had the desire to pursue alternative artistic endeavors. Generally speaking, MASH experienced several cast changes during its 11-season run, but it never wavered from its core purpose of illustrating the cost of war via the prism of empathy, wit, and strong human ties. In light of this, let's get straight to the series' first significant departure. In a moment that stunned the country, the writers decided to kill off the character of an actor whose departure was so unexpected, Stephenson McLean. It's likely that seasoned MASH viewers will cite the Season 3 finale's last scene as the one that affected them the most. Henry Abyssinia. Even though it was only one line and was transmitted subtly by radar, it had a profound impact. Over the Sea of Japan, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's aircraft was shot down. No one survived. In addition to shocking viewers, that moment was historic, since it was the first significant departure of McLean Stevenson, a key member of the MASH cast. How did we get there, though? From the start, McLean had played a key role in MASH. His portrayal of Colonel Henry Blake, the genial but frequently perplexed commanding officer of the 477th, was the ideal counterpoint to the craziness of battle. Henry Blake contributed humanity, where Hawkeye and Trapper contributed wit and rebellion. Always well-intentioned, but occasionally frazzled and occasionally naive. McLean received a Golden Globe and a lot of accolades for his portrayal in the first few seasons. His admirers adored him because he was witty and approachable. However, things weren't nearly that peaceful behind the scenes. The cast and writers' autobiographies and interviews reveal that McLean became more and more irritated with his part. Although it began as a loose ensemble comedy, Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce soon became the focal point of the program. Additionally, Alda's character gained emotional and narrative weight as he contributed more to the show's writing and direction. Meanwhile, McLean felt marginalized. He was so marginalized that in 1975 he even said to People magazine, "I want to be number one. I want to be the guy carrying the show." But as egotistical as this probably sounds, it wasn't actually about McClane's ego. You see, McClane had these big dreams of becoming a star. He had huge ambitions. But if there's one thing you should know about Hollywood, it's that it's usually very easy for an actor to fall into a stereotypical role. And for McClane, he was falling into this pit that he wanted nothing to do with. He saw how powerful television could be, and he believed he had the charisma and talent to anchor a show of his own. He wanted to pursue opportunities where he wouldn't always be the second or third banana. He wanted to be the first. So at the end of season 3, McClane approached the producers and told them he would not be returning. Now here's where things took a turn. Traditionally, when actors left sitcoms, their characters were written off gently, transferred, reassigned, and maybe even sent off to get married. But MASH wasn't a traditional sitcom. Its creators, Larry and Gene, saw an opportunity to do something bold. They wanted to remind viewers that MASH was, at its heart, a war story. That in war, not everyone makes it home. And this was the perfect opportunity. What succeeded this was the legendary Abyssinia Henry episode. In the episode, Henry Blake receives his discharge orders and prepares to head home. There's celebration, tears, hugs, a joyful farewell. For 25 minutes, it feels like a happy ending. But then comes the final scene like a raging storm. Radar walks into the operating room, hat in hand, face grave.
The doctors are mid-surgery when he breaks the news that Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. There were no survivors. What followed was an intense silence that could be heard around America. No dramatic music, no laugh track or helicopter noises, just stunned faces and the beep of surgical equipment. That scene changed TV history. It was one of the first times a beloved sitcom character was killed off permanently and without warning. The raw reactions from the cast was partly real, as only a few knew the ending beforehand. Alda later revealed that Gary Berghoff, who plays Radar, was the only actor told in advance so he could prepare. The rest of the cast was reacting genuinely in that final take. As soon as it aired, the episode generated an immediate and intense response. CBS received thousands of letters, many praising the show's honesty, others angry that such a beloved character was taken away so suddenly. Some even accused the producers of going too far. But Larry defended the decision, saying, "We wanted to say that not everybody gets to go home," and that they did. But what happened to McClane after his departure? Let's just say things weren't as rosy as he probably imagined. Granted, things were pretty great at first. He signed a lucrative deal with NBC, eager to strike out on his own. He then moved on to star in The McClane-Stevenson Show, a family sitcom built around his affable charm. He appeared to be charting out his own terms and making a name for himself in the industry, but it was short-lived. His show was cancelled after just one season, and a second attempt with the show Hello Larry fared even worse. Despite high hopes and heavy promotion, the show was critically panned and became a running joke in later years. In retrospect, McClane would come to regret leaving MASH. In a 1983 interview with the Los Angeles Times, he admitted, "Took myself out of the game." It wasn't just that his new shows flopped, it was more so the realization that MASH was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The cast, the writing, the impact. It was lightning in a bottle. Some of his co-stars, like Alda and Loretta Sweet, expressed sadness about his departure, but they also understood his desire to branch out. Others quietly wondered if he had been too quick to walk away from something special. Despite his regrets, McClane continued working in television and made occasional guest appearances on other shows. But he never found the same level of success or emotional connection with audiences as he did playing Henry Blake. When he passed away in '96 at the age of 68, tributes poured in from fans and colleagues, with Alda remembering him as a wonderful actor and a good man, and Gary calling him a light-hearted spirit who brought joy to everyone around him. Say what you want about McClane, but in a way his departure gave the show its soul, and that's the irony. While he may have left to find his big break, the role he walked away from became the most enduring of his career. But if you thought McClane's departure was nerve-wracking, Wayne Rogers' exit from MASH was something else entirely. Quiet, complicated, and full of drama behind the scenes. Wayne Rogers. While McClane got a farewell episode, a tearful goodbye, and a moment that became TV history, Wayne Rogers simply disappeared. We saw him in one episode, and the next, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, and certainly no closure. Why, you ask? Let's just say things aren't always as rosy on set as they might seem on camera. To understand what happened, we need to go back to the beginning. Wayne Rogers played trapper John McIntyre, one half of the original comedic duo that defined Masha's early seasons. He and Alda's Hawkeye Pierce were the life of the four-toed. The chemistry between the duo was magnetic, and audiences loved it, especially when they decided to throw in their fast-paced banter, mischief, and their unshakable friendship. It was like watching a wartime version of The Odd Couple, albeit with scalpel jokes. But behind the laughs, tension was secretly brewing. As it turns out, Wayne had signed on to MASH under the impression that it would be a true ensemble show with equal screen time for the core cast. But as the series evolved, much of the spotlight began to shift toward Alda's character. It soon became clear that Hawkeye became more than just a co-lead. He was now the moral center of the show, the emotional anchor. And soon after, Alda, who was a gifted writer and director, started contributing heavily to the show's creative direction. Things really started to look different. Initially, Wayne didn't mind Alda's success. On the contrary, the two were reportedly friendly off-set, but naturally, he soon began to feel sidelined. Alda's character seemed to be the only one getting some sort of maturity. The others just appeared stuck in their original cocoons. Anyway, just like that, Trapper John had gone from being a leading man to a supporting character. And as Wayne later explained in interviews, it wasn't about ego, it was about the integrity of storytelling. He once said, Trapper didn't have much to do. He was one of two buddies. And then he became the guy who nodded at everything Alan said. But unlike McClane, who made a public exit and was given a send-off, Wayne chose a different path. Quietly and without a fuss, he decided not to renew his contract after season 3. The producers didn't even know he was officially gone until shortly before filming began for season 4. And here's where things get even more unusual. Wayne's contract with the show was never formally signed, meaning all along he'd been working on a handshake deal. This meant that when the producers threatened to sue him for breach of contract, they had no legal footing as he hadn't broken anything. He had simply walked away from a show he no longer believed was giving his character the space to grow. His departure was abrupt, and it left the writers scrambling. As a result, they had to rework the opening of season 4, explaining in the first episode that Trapper John had been discharged while Hawkeye was on leave. The reaction from the audience was brutal. First Henry, and now Trapper? Was this even real? To make matters worse, there was no farewell scene for him, no hospital party, and most importantly, no heartfelt goodbye. With the producers scrambling to do damage control, in Wayne's place came Mike Farrell as BJ Honeycutt, a character written to be more grounded, emotionally complex, and perhaps less rebellious than Trapper. With this change, the dynamic of the show shifted immediately. Gone was the buddy comedy edge, and in was a softer, more introspective version of the show. But here's the irony. MASH actually grew deeper, and arguably better, in Trapper's absence. Although many still argue that they prefer the earlier seasons, for us, we'd say the opposite. Wayne, meanwhile, didn't disappear from the spotlight. After MASH, he appeared in TV shows and films, but eventually took an entirely different path, becoming a successful financial investor and commentator. Wayne was smart, very smart. He had studied history at Princeton, and later built a career on Wall Street. In fact, by the 1990s, he was a regular panelist on Fox News' Cashin, discussing economics and policy. He made millions, not from acting, but from savvy investing. Still, he never completely walked away from Hollywood. He did a few TV movies, took on a couple of recurring roles, and even joked about his time on MASH in later interviews. Despite the suddenness of his departure, there didn't seem to be any lasting bad blood between him and the cast. In fact, Alda once said, "Wayne is one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. I missed him a lot when he left." That friendship remained intact. And when Wayne passed away in 2015 at the age of 82, Alda tweeted, "He was smart, funny, curious, and dedicated. We made a pact to give each other a hard time for the rest of our lives, and I'm sorry we won't have the chance." Although Wayne left MASH at the height of its early popularity, without fanfare or applause, he's still remembered with affection by fans who loved Trapper's playful grin and easygoing charm. We've focused on how these performers all went out to follow different careers. The series was emotionally taxing, but what about the people who quit? Berghoff, Gary. Ironically, Gary Berghoff left MASH without much fanfare or celebration, despite being the team's leader. He departed in silence, with great suffering, and for far more profound reasons than most people ever understood. For admirers, Gary was the wide-eyed, intuitive corporate clerk known as Radar O'Reilly, with the war beneath one arm and a teddy bear beneath the other. Helicopters were audible to Radar before anyone else. The intensity of the battlefield was lessened by his charming, almost childlike innocence. Radar was the 4T-77th's glue, soul, and some could even argue its emotional heartbeat, even when Hawkeye and Trapper disobeyed the rules and Henry Blake struggled to lead. However, beneath that quiet voice and apprehensive smile, an actor was gradually collapsing under the pressure of everything. The only performer to return to his role in the original MASH movie from 1970 was Gary. And by doing this, he gave Radar a flaw that wasn't present in the movie. Radar was more cunning and maybe a little sleazy in the film adaptation. Gary transformed Radar on television into a memorable representation of wartime innocence. He was frequently seen as irreplaceable because of how iconic his performance was. However, flaws started to appear by season 7. Gary was having both personal and professional difficulties. His own perfectionism and MASH's demanding production schedule started to wear him down. Had protracted struggles with depression and anxiety, which at the time seldom garnered media attention but had a significant impact on his capacity to handle the demands of filmmaking. Then came the anguish of being separated from his loved ones. Gary was married and had a little kid by the late 1970s, but he was away from home all the time due to the lengthy hours on set. Additionally, he later acknowledged that he believed that missing his daughter's formative years was a mistake that he would always regret. Less screen time to better handle his personal life, co-star Mike Farrell remembered in a 2018 interview. Given how essential Radar was to the program, the producers made every effort to accommodate him. Gary even received more vacation time and fewer season appearances at one point, but it wasn't enough for him. He was done on an emotional level. He then took the tough choice to permanently leave MASH in Season 8. However, the show didn't let him go unnoticed this time, unlike Wayne. One of the most heartbreaking plotlines in the series, Goodbye Radar, was a two-part farewell episode for Radar. In it, Radar finds the 4Kilo77th disintegrating while he is away after returning from leave. As usual, he initially attempts to make everything right, but eventually he comes to the conclusion that it's time to go on. He must return home for his mother. There is a problem with his community farm, and maybe Radar has matured at last. The episode's last scene is almost silent, just Radar leaving his teddy bear on Hawkeye's bunk and walking away, silhouetted against the Korean sky. It was a touching and emotionally charged moment, and it expressed all the show was unable to express. And the audience experienced that loss, as it was like bidding farewell to our own innocence as they saw him go. Gary had a lengthy hiatus from acting after MASH. He appeared in a few shows, including as the brief spin-off Walter, in which Radar is a rookie police officer. It didn't take off, though. He eventually made the decision to leave Hollywood completely in favor of painting, protecting wildlife, and creating new things. You heard correctly. Creating. One of his many patents was for a fishing tackle system. His passion for the outdoors quickly served as a haven and a means of recovery from the emotional toll that MASH had placed on him, as well as the demands of celebrity. Gary would subsequently clarify that burnout and my family were the two reasons he departed. Who could blame him for wanting to pick up the pieces of my life? Gary has a calm existence now. He rarely does interviews. He doesn't seek attention. However, fans occasionally recall the young person with the tender heart when they see him at a convention or come across a rare comment, and the large ears that were able to hear helicopters before everyone else did. Let's go on to Larry Linville, the actor who portrayed one of the funniest villains on television. It's difficult to envision early Mush without the inflexible, petulant, and utterly self-important Frank Burns. The figure that people loved to loathe was Major Burns, who was expertly portrayed by Larry Linville. He was the ideal comic counterpoint to Hawkeye and Trapper because of his sycophantic fixation with regulations, his covert liaison with Major Holohan, and his profound inferiority problem. Frank's one-note villainy, however, started to stand out as the story developed, and not in a positive manner. Frank stayed in a rut while other characters developed. His biases were never questioned, and his fears never changed. And Larry, a performer with much more variety than he was permitted to display, began to feel the pressure. By Season 5's conclusion, Larry had taken a risk. He refused to extend his contract. He claimed to have developed the persona to the fullest extent possible. He was undoubtedly not pushed, and was not fired. He just turned to leave, realizing that MASH was expanding beyond Frank's narrow role, and that the impact was massive. Frank's departure allowed the program to examine deeper moral dilemmas. A cartoon villain was no longer necessary. Irony and humanity, as opposed to slapstick and cruelty, could provide the humor. We like to think that Larry's departure represented a creative turning point for MASH in a lot of ways. One that would make it legendary instead than just good. Fans still felt the loss. Nevertheless, despite this, Frank was the joke and the stress for 5 seasons. His exit made the series reevaluate its cadence. He was written off screen as having gotten a cozy promotion, even though the show's plot did not lament his departure. It was ingrained in the very fabric of the show. Larry later appeared in TV shows and movies as a guest star, but he was never able to land a role as prominent or memorable as Major Frank Burns. Another character, who would also eventually quit the program, was brought in to sort of replace Larry's role, who was also written out of the show. Steers by David Ogden. If the antagonist in the cartoon was Frank Burns, the slow burn was Charles Emerson Winchester III. Winchester, who was brought in to take Frank's place in Season 6, was a complete contrast. He was not merely an enemy. He was a sophisticated, intelligent, haughty, and intensely private person. He posed a threat to Hawkeye, BJ, and the show's overall tone, and he was performed with wonderful restraint by David Ogden Steers. Winchester first came across as arrogant and obnoxious, but eventually flaws emerged. He was cautious, but not heartless. He was perhaps a little arrogant,
but he was certainly not harsh. A guy dealing with the harsh realities of war, one patient at a time, was hidden beneath the layers of wine and opera conversation. David didn't leave in the middle of the series like Larry or the others did. He stayed to the very end, departing in poetic conclusion rather than in complaint. One of the most eerily lovely scenes in television history is his last scene, in which he teaches Chinese prisoners of war to play Mozart. And it was Winchester's strength. His purpose was not to win favor. He was there to tell us that everyone is broken by war, even those who believe they are too civilized to be affected. David declined the opportunity to participate in the spin-off after MASH, stating that the arc of his character was over. Winchester had spoken what he needed to say in his own terms. He went on to voice Disney characters after his successful tenure on the program, and in 2009, he came out as gay in an interview with the website Gossip Boy, declaring, "I am Dave, very proud to be so." He claimed that he had not come out earlier in his career out of concern that it would harm his prospects of getting a job, especially while he was still appearing in movies and television shows and performing voice acting for Disney. There was genuine fear at the time that actors may lose their roles or be typecast if they came out. He was highly regarded in the field even though he spent the majority of his career keeping his personal life private, for his exceptional range as well as his dignity. He died of bladder cancer in 2018 at the age of 75. His reputation endures, however, not only because of his performances but also because of the quiet bravery he displayed in living his truth according to his own terms. However, this film would not be complete without a few honorary mentions. The women's roles were crucial to the creation of the show's tone, even though they usually played supporting and background roles. Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, a member of the Women of MASH, was one such woman. Being noticed was a more difficult task for the women of MASH in a battle zone where men were making jokes to ward off the darkness, and no woman had to endure a more difficult ascent or a more striking metamorphosis than Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. Loretta Swit played the role. Margaret was written as the joke at the start of MASH. Her moniker, Hot Lips, which alludes to a joke in the first movie, said it all. She was frequently made fun of and was rigid by the book. However, Margaret was not allowed to remain in that box by Loretta. She gave the character strength, vulnerability, and intellect with each season. By the series' conclusion, Margaret had gained more than just respect. She was complex, fully formed, and subtly innovative. "I wanted her to be a woman of substance," Loretta previously stated in an interview. She was too. Margaret rose to become a distinguished officer, an accomplished head nurse, and one of the few figures who publicly questioned the brutality of the war while maintaining unwavering accuracy in her work. It's interesting to note that Loretta remained in MASH for all 11 seasons, although many male players quit. Only 4 actors made appearances in both the pilot and the finale, including her. Margaret remained and changed over time, in contrast to recurrent female figures like Nurse Cutler and Lieutenant Ginger Bayless. Margaret stood tall in a show when everyone was reduced to their most basic selves due to war. The lone female in the opening credits ensured that the lads weren't carrying the show by themselves because of Loretta's perseverance. Which actors were missing? Tell us in the space provided below. Thank you for viewing. Click play on the video that is currently playing on your screen to see more thrilling videos. Additionally, remember to hit the bell, like, and subscribe so that you may be informed when a new video is released.